Für ein rechtskräftiges Protokoll muss immer ein zweiter Jurist anwesend sein.
Dann folge ich Ihnen ins Stadthaus, damit der Herr Senator all das zu Protokoll nehmen kann. Sie sind wunderschön.
Hello, welcome back to this special exclusive, only here to be seen Patreon episode of me cutting a film. I thought this episode I'm going to do something, I'm not going to show a lot of editing. I wanted to talk about two concepts that I use quite often and show you examples of how I used it in this film. I'm talking about the ellipsis and I'm talking about cross-cutting. Both of those techniques can really help you dramatize a scene. You can really make some smart choices where you keep the audience engaged. Here's a scene that I cut. We're in the middle of this case where somebody tried to poison this guy. Our senator sent his note taker to go on her own and figure out what happened. And in the previous scene, she was talking to the man that almost ate the poisoned bacon. And she received a letter from the caretaker upstairs and was asked to come up. So she finds out that this woman is actually in bad shape. She seems to also be suffering from potentially being poisoned. They first talk about the fact that this has happened before. She has some interesting information to report about this case that she needs to make a report on. So you get an idea of what the scene is. I'm going to play a little bit.
Bitte.
Kato Böhmer, Sie haben nach uns verlangt.
Ich habe nach dem Gericht geschickt.
So she said she's calling the judge.
Senator Droste ist verhindert.
He said he couldn't make it, the senator.
Und warum schickt er eine Frau?
And she's like, why is he
Ich bin
sending a
Protokollant mit
woman?
allen Befugnissen.
She says, well, I'm the official note taker and I have all full
Und dennoch?
privileges to investigate.
Nein, ich bedauere. Es geht Ihnen nicht gut.
She asks her, are you not doing well?
Übelkeit.
Passiert das hier öfters?
Ab und zu?
She's like, does this happen
Protokollant?
quite often? And she said, yes.
Dann haben Sie
She's
studiert?
not feeling well. She asked her
am
more about
Lesekreis
how,
der
so you
Rechtswissenschaften
ended up
gehört.
studying?
Mein Vater ist Professor in Göttingen.
She says her dad is a
Haben Sie als Kind auch so keine Witwe gespielt?
professor at a university and he helped her get educated.
Sie waren mehrmals verheiratet.
And she's like, oh, do you also play widow?
Ihr Vater ist ein kluger Mann, der Sie unterstützt. Meiner verheiratete mich mit einem Ehrenwert.
And then she sort of directs the conversation to the fact that
Aber wissen Sie was?
her father was really
Wir haben gar nicht
smart,
Franzosenzeit.
but her own father was more interested in marrying her off to a person that she didn't like, and that guy sort of slept around. They were like
Und dann stand ich von heute auf morgen alleine da. Mit seiner Brut.
bordellos, what do you call that?
3 Stück.
With prostitutes, and he was sleeping around, and eventually
Nach einer
he had
riesigen
syphilis,
unter der Erde verschwunden.
and then he disappeared.
Mein Beileid.
And shortly thereafter, her kids started dying off.
Sie wissen, warum wir hier sind?
Notice this point here. She puts down her notebook and now she picks it back up. I'm going to use this as a point of intercutting another scene in here. I'm cross-cutting. I'll get back to that.
Sie wissen, warum wir hier sind?
Wegen der Speckschwarte etwa.
She asks her, so do you know why I'm here? And she's like, because of the poisoned bacon.
Senator Droste bereitet deshalb eine
And
forensische
she's like, yes,
Untersuchung
we're
vor.
investigating this. We're going to have some forensics going on here.
Endlich.
Wie meinen Sie das?
Über dieses Haus wird schlecht geredet.
And she's like, thank God somebody is finally doing something about this. And she's like, what do you mean? She said, well, this happened quite often and people talk about this house. And then our note taker is like, well, we should make a report. And she gets up.
Bitte.
Für ein rechtskräftiges Protokoll muss immer ein zweiter Jurist anwesend
She's
sein.
like, well, I need a witness.
Dann folge ich Ihnen ins Stadthaus,
She's
damit
like, well, I'll
Senator
follow
all das
you
zu Protokoll nehmen kann.
to the court so you can make the report.
Sie sind wunderschön.
She's like, well, you're really pretty. She's freaked out. So, and then we're cutting to the potion that she pulls out. First indication that she might actually be the one that is poisoning everybody. It's kind of a little misdirect. Possibly. We don't know. So that's that. It's a fairly long scene, 3 minutes, 40 seconds, and they're jumping a little bit all over in terms of their conversation. I have this other scene that I want to intercut with it, because dramatically, sometimes scenes run too long and you can't make them shorter. Like, you need all the information, all these moments to play. And at this point, my instinct is the scene plays too long and I'm losing some of the tension. So I have the second scene here that happens technically at the same time. This is the reason why the senator couldn't come, because this guy here, he's a captain. He wants to convince him not to support the idea of putting trains into the city, but instead push the idea of remodeling the port. This really is the B story of this film, this whole idea of train or not train in the city.
Senator.
Herr Kapitän.
Senator, Captain.
Haben sich das Amtszimmer ja schon zu eigen gemacht.
He's like, wow, you really made over this room.
Gildemeister gar nicht
Are
zurück.
you planning to stay long term? Because he's only the replacement senator here, because the main guy went to Brazil on business. He's like,
Aber bis dahin gedenke ich, ihn angemessen zu vertreten.
no, I'm just trying to
Sonst wie Ihr Vater.
represent
Verstehe.
in honor.
Aber die
That's a
Würde
picture of his
des
dad.
derart noblen Namens
Ich bevorzuge es, ihn als Geschenk anzusehen.
und damit wacker zu wirtschaften. Was hätte Ihr Herr Vater wohl gesagt, wenn sein Sohn als Sparkassendirektor von Projekten profitiert, die er als Senator politisch vorantreibt?
So he's sort of pointing out that the dad is very well known, very respected, and he's sort of accusing the senator here. Captain is accusing the senator that he might be misusing his replacement position to advance his own causes, which is he wants to push this train, and the train is financed by the local bank, and he's actually the director of that bank as well. So there's a possibility that he might actually benefit, like speculate on prices going up for the land and so on and so forth.
Was meinen Sie?
He's like, what do you mean?
Ganz einfach.
Like,
Finanziert
simple.
die Sparkassen?
If your
Ihr
bank
Eisenbahnkonsortium?
finances the training,
Das
the
geht Sie nichts
trains,
an.
then you benefit.
Welch immense Wertsteigerung würde unfruchtbares Marschland
It's
erfahren.
like, okay, the prices will go up on the land where the train track is built
Klingt
on.
doch nach einer
He's like, well, that sounds
interessanten
like an
Investition.
intriguing investment opportunity, don't you think? He's like, yeah, and you're
Sie sind auf
benefiting
dem
from it.
Holzweg, Herr Kapitän.
He's
Dann
like,
gehört dem
you're,
Königreich Hannover.
you're misplaced. Your assessment is wrong because the land is actually owned by the neighboring
Zwischenstaatliche
kingdom.
Verhandlungen. Da bleiben Spekulanten außen vor.
And so there is the prices are set, and there's not going to be an opportunity for private gouging or whatever might happen.
Bremens ganzes Geld steckt in dem neuen Hafen.
He's like,
Wo
all
wollen
the
Sie
money
denn
of the
bei
city is in the port.
42.000 Einwohnern die Steuergelder hernehmen?
Where do you think that money is going to
Maschinen,
come from
deren
to finance a technologies referring to the trains that it is unproven at the point back in
Zukunft
Germany
völlig
there were
ungewiss
zero
ist.
trains.
Während das Rückgrat bremischer Wirtschaft, die
1827.
Dampfschifffahrt, zum Erliegen kommt.
Ich dachte, das Thema hätten wir ad acta gelegt.
He's like, I thought we already talked about this and we we sort of agreed to disagree on this.
Vergessen Sie die Eisenbahn. Protegieren Sie uns. Und ich beteilige Sie mit 15%.
He's like, forget about the trains. Throw your weight behind the port and I will give you 15% of stock. So that's the other storyline. And here I already did an ellipsis because this scene actually continues on. So I can actually show this where the senator that has now received this proposal is reacting to it.
Und ich beteilige Sie mit 15%.
An was? Ich rate Ihnen dringend, vorsichtig zu sein.
And he's like, you better be careful with what you're saying, because obviously what he's doing right now is borderline corruption.
Einen schönen Tag noch.
And then he basically kicks him out.
Elas. Elas.
So that's how the scene was written and actually ends, that they finish their conversation and that they arrive at a conclusion, which is he's sort of being offered a bribe and he declines and kicks the guy out. It's still a tense ending, right? Because they didn't resolve their conflict. The senator wants the trains, the captain wants the port, the captain offers him a bribe and he declines. But it deflates the scene, in my point of view, to actually reveal all that. I'd much rather have him not reveal how he's going to react
Das Thema hätten wir ad acta gelegt.
to this bribe offer.
Vergessen Sie die Eisenbahn. Protegieren Sie uns. Und ich beteilige Sie mit 15%.
Boom, and the scene is over. This way, I leave it up to the audience to decide whether they think he accepted the offer or not. And I leave it right there. And I'm going to cut this whole scene in between this longer scene that I mentioned to you. So again, I'm using an ellipsis at the end of this scene to take out a resolution, and dramatically that heightens the scene. I'm ending at the climax and I'm not resolving it. That's number one. Number two is I'm going to intercut these scenes, this and this, because I feel like this scene plays too long. And I identify this spot that I pointed out earlier where before she picks up the notebook again, which is not just visually a story turn, but it is also dramatically, because after this turn, she picks up her stuff.
Wegen der Speckschwarte etwa.
And she asks her, do you know why I'm actually here? And she's like, because of the poisoned bacon. So that is a very definitive turn in the story. Before she starts investigating it, I'm going to break up the scene.
Mein Beileid.
And I'll cut to this scene. And what that does dramatically is, by intercutting, you're creating a dramatic beat. There are three main dramatic beats you can use to advance a story. The first two are the most powerful. Everything needs to be happening because of something or despite of something. But there is this trick that I'm using here, which is called Meanwhile at the Ranch, which means you have a scene, and when at some point maybe you run out of ammunition to keep the tension rising, and then you just cut to a completely different scene, and then you cut back to it. And this Meanwhile at the Ranch moment will actually sort of reset the tension and pick it up where we were before, but keep building. It's going to feel more intense. So again, three dramatic beats you can use, devices to advance story. This happened, therefore this happened. The other one is just as successful. It's this happened, and despite of it, this happened. And the last one is this happened, meanwhile this happened. And this is what we're doing here. And I found a good story turn where we can just sort of refresh our senses. We can deal with the B story for a while. And once again, I'm not going to resolve the scene. I'm going to use the elliptical, which means taking stuff out and leaving it up to the audience to put it together in their mind.
Protegieren Sie uns. Und ich beteilige Sie mit 15%.
And then I'm cutting back to this scene. And technically, it feels like they probably kept on talking about stuff. And we're cutting back to this minutes later.
Wegen der Speckschwarte etwa.
Es soll Arsen daran gewesen sein.
Sie sind...
I quite like this cut here. With the music starting, where she said, "Wow, you're so beautiful." And then notice what's going to happen after this. So I talked about this, that I'm hinting that that could potentially be the
Einen
poison.
schönen Tag noch, Herr Ehlers.
And then I'm cutting back to this scene, and he now cut him out. And now he threw him out. So we don't know whether he accepted the bribe or not. That's that. I hope I made my point clear. There are two things that I use, which is the meanwhile at the ranch. Things are happening at the same time, and because we're intercutting between the two, it creates the feeling of heightened tension. And the other thing is the ellipsis.
Während das Rückgrat bremischer Wirtschaft, die Dampfschifffahrt, zum Erliegen kommt.
Ich dachte, das Thema hätten wir ad acta gelegt.
Vergessen Sie die Eisenbahn. Protegieren Sie uns. Und ich beteilige Sie mit 15%.
It already plays quite nicely, even though this is the first cut, rough cut. I tend to cut my rough cuts pretty polished. I always try to make them feel like it's already a movie. It's got music in there and all this stuff. But again, I want to stress, these are like the things that as an editor you do, which is you take lines out. The actors add all that subtext to it by just the way that they listen, react, perform, what they do and express. It's quite clear what's going on, and the audience is always slightly ahead of the conversation. Then just take parts out, make it less obvious. In the next episode, I'm going to do more editing, but these are two really, really powerful tools you can use in an editor. Thanks so much for being a patron, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Well, I don't hate this angle. So I actually like this take a lot. The only thing is he's got his hat on.